And in any event, I didn't get beyond that because we had a little Basset Hound rebellion in the background. But I got up to the point where Kenneth Ford had written the report that Saddam Hussein possessed no WMDs in May of 2003. And shortly thereafter, he found himself on the outs up to the point when he was arrested by the FBI, NSA, and others. It's kind of a long story. That happened in January of '04. Anyway, Wayne, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was one of the worst, I think, national security trials I ever covered, because it was quite clear after a while that not only was the judge bought and paid for and shopped for, federal judge Peter Massetti from the Southern District of Maryland, but also the assistant U.S. attorney David Salem appeared to be in cahoots, not just with the judge, but here's the most astounding thing, with Ken Ford's defense attorney as well. And it was quite apparent that the jury had been hand selected, that the process of jury selection was tainted. There was not supposed to be anybody on that jury that was affiliated in any way with NSA, but yet it turns out there was an NSA contractor on the jury. You don't know how that person got through. In any normal trial, it wouldn't happen, but it was quite clear that Ken Ford was being made an example of because, as you mentioned, he worked in what's known as the Iraq shop during the outset of the Iraq War. That's right. The part of NSA that intercepts Iraqi government communications, diplomatic, military, whatnot, and determined that based on those intercepts, there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Now, this is at the same time Cheney's going to the CIA 25 times, looking over the analyst's shoulder, demanding that that if they can't find the intelligence, they cook it. Obviously, the same policy was in place at NSA. And because Ken Ford's name appeared on the bottom of that report that wound up on Mr. Cheney's desk, somebody in the administration, Cheney, I would figure himself, instructed his people to make an example of Ken Ford. So every other intelligence agent, when ordered to cook the books on the intelligence, would do the same thing or suffer the consequences.
You know, maybe for context, you could just recount quickly. This is the time of Valerie Plame also.
The same time frame. I was covering actually all those stories at the same time, and it was very apparent that between the Valerie Plame incident and Ken Ford, who got not as much attention, obviously, as Valerie Plame, that this was a huge problem inside the intelligence community. And of course, I was speaking to others as well in these three-letter intelligence agencies who were telling me the same thing about how the intelligence was being altered, cooked, filleted, fricasseed, just for to placate Dick Cheney and the neocons and the basically the neocons, the Israel lobby, one and the same. People like Wolfowitz and all these other people, Douglas Feith, all the people that are supporting Mitt Romney now for president, and Rick Santorum. Now the worst thing is how it was covered by the media. When I first read I think it was an Associated Press wire service story on Ken Ford, I assumed, based on the story, that he'd been caught taking massive amounts of classified material out of NSA. I figured he had to have been an authorized courier. Now, they had some problems back during the Cold War with at least one courier who was making deliveries to the Soviet embassy. But to take massive amounts of material out of NSA, you would have had to have been authorized to do that, as a courier would be. There is absolutely no way, as they charge Ken Ford with, that he took boxes of material in broad daylight out of the most secure facility on the face of the planet.
Right, that would be like you or I doing it, right? I mean, it's just it's
Yeah,
obvious it's supposed to be the most secure site on the planet in a way, and it's the National
yeah,
Security Agency. You don't carry
yeah.
boxes of secret documents out the front door.
No, no, absolutely not. It's absolutely it's impossible to do it. As a matter of fact, another guy who worked at NSA who blew the whistle on what was going on with illegal activities there as far as wiretapping was concerned, Russ Tice. Russ Tice actually appeared as a defense witness for Ken Ford at his trial in Greenbelt, Maryland, and stated that it was impossible what the government was charging Ken Ford with doing, taking stuff out of NSA. It was impossible. Having worked there himself, he said it was impossible. But of course, then prosecutors decided to attack the veracity of Russ Tice, suggesting that he left the NSA not because he was a whistleblower, but because he was mentally unbalanced. This is the way.
Yeah, right.
This is the way things are done in this country. This is Kafka, mixed with Orwell and everything else, and
Updated with 21st century technology, both political and police and literally electronic.
yeah. And the worst thing was how the Washington Post covered the story. The Washington Post reporter was a guy named Ruben Castaneda. He actually encountered me up there. I was the only other member of the press, as far as I know, covering the Ken Ford trial. There might have been some others that slipped in and out, but as far as people that were covering it from the outset to the finish, it was him and it was myself. Now, Castaneda at one point in time decided to come into a conference room during a break, and he asked me why I was looking at certain documents. He maintained they were sealed by the judge. I mean, I asked him, "Are you an officer of the court or are you a Washington Post reporter?" And he looked at me. I says, "I realize you're one and the same."
Yeah, right.
I mean, this is the Washington Compost after all. Now, Ruben Castaneda, I mean, he just wrote a puff piece on the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, the same U.S. Attorney, Ron Rosenstein, who prosecuted Ken Ford.
Right.
And he had such revealing things in his article on Ron Rosenstein, things like what the two types of coffee mugs that he uses in his office. That his 11-year-old daughter, he interviewed her, and he felt that she has a future ahead as a great attorney.
Wow.
I mean,
does he have a swimming pool? Did we get a tour of a swimming pool, or
Well, we didn't get the Robin Leach like stuff, but he also sums it up. He's saying Ron Rosenstein is basically a real Jimmy Stewart a real life character.
Wow.
Ron Rosenstein is more like the dirtiest judge you would find in a Jimmy Cagney movie.
Wow.
Not a Jimmy Stewart movie. But this is how the Washington Post reported the story. Everything was negative about Ken Ford. As far as the Post was concerned, he was convicted, guilty before the end of the trial, and nothing about the fact of that the government's evidence against Ken Ford had no merit, carried no weight, I mean, we got to remember Ken Ford had been a uniformed Secret Service agent at the White House guarding Bill Clinton before he and George W. Bush for a short time before he transferred to a new career at NSA.
Right.
So
this would be a good spot, actually. Why don't we go through the facts of the case first? The allegations, and then the facts of the case, what the government said happened, and then what came out at the trial, which you attended. I know Ken said, by the way, you were the only journalist that actually reported any of the facts of the case. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah, because the other guy there was with the Washington Post, and I don't consider them to be journalists. I do consider the Washington Post to be the greatest resource of stenographers you will find in the Washington, D.C. area. More stenographers than even some of the big law firms here.
Wow.
But anyway, the case was based on Ken had left NSA to take another job with a contractor. It was Lockheed Martin. And when he checked out, as anyone normally who leaves NSA, you arrange through security to take your personal belongings home. Now that could be your unclassified workbooks, training workbooks, and other things. Your own personal unclassified notes.
Picture your girlfriend, whatever.
Yeah, your desk calendar, stuff like that.
Empty your desk.
So that was already cleared by the security people, by his work supervisor. So when he went back to pick this stuff up, this had already been cleared by security. Now, the government maintained that he actually snuck out loads of classified documents when he, his last day at work at NSA, and then took them home. Well, it turns out that Ken was targeted by a confidential informant, a woman who had a long record with the FBI. These are the types of people the FBI use. This woman, of course, basically got very close to Ken, in a romantic kind of way. Apparently, she contacted him through some sort of social networking website. And this woman got very close to Ken, and then apparently the way this thing happened, the way this thing went down, the woman contacted NSA security and said that Ken had classified information in his home. When the FBI and NSA security showed up at his home, she was there and basically said, I know where it is, and they found some document in her own suitcase.
Right.
I mean, whether the thing was classified, it was in a FedEx envelope, who knows? The government did not reveal any of the information, documents really in this case. Because
not at trial, not like what it was and how it got there?
Well, apparently they did to the jury, but they would have these sidebars with the judge. Now, one of the most amazing things is when I wrote the story during the trial about the Iraq signals intelligence, that there was this report that Ken's name was on and it wound up on Cheney's desk. Judge Massetti stopped the proceedings and asked if I was in the courtroom because I had already written the story.
Really?
And I wasn't there. I didn't for one reason or another, because my car was basically getting ready to die in those days. I think I only had maybe 2 trips left with the old bucket. But
a reporter's car, like you'd see in one of those old movies, like a Frank Capra movie or something.
Yeah, this was more like Fred Flintstone's car with a huge hole underneath the driver's seat.
For your feet, yeah, right.
That was for my brakes. That was my. But Massetti, I wasn't there that day, and he stopped the proceedings and said, "Is Wayne Madsen in the courtroom right now?" And he said, so he said, "No, he's not, apparently." And he said, "Well, that's too bad, because if he were," he said, "I would call him to the witness stand, put him under oath, and ask him where he got this information about the signals intelligence." Now, can you imagine?
Really?
This moron is sitting. Well, let me tell you,
He's
Massetti.
a federal judge?
Yeah, federal judge.
From the bench, wow.
Yeah. I would have, of course, had he done it, I would have just walked out. He would have had to have the marshals arrest me, and then I would have, invoked my First Amendment rights.
You think?
Yeah. I mean, but, the point is, Massetti, the assistant U.S. attorney, Salem, the U.S. attorney, Rosenstein, and the defense attorney, Hecht, were all tied up with the Israel lobby. Out of anyone who knows the D.C. area knows that Rockville, Maryland is like a nexus for these Israel lobby people. Southern Montgomery County, you might as well be in southern Tel Aviv.
With Mossad running the show.
Well, basically, this whole thing was set up against Ken. There was real collusion between defense, the judge, the bench, and the prosecutor. As so much so that this trial should have been thrown out. The only conspiracy that took place was between these individuals.
Let me ask, who was the attorney general then? This is in, say, January, February of '04. Who was that?
That would have still been
Ashcroft?
as far as that would have been Ashcroft,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Ashcroft is still there, and we know that there was all kinds of things going on in those days. We had Stellar Wind, which was the warrantless wiretapping
Right.
that was taking place, and this of course is during the election, the re-election year for Bush. So they didn't want any of this information out there. The abuses that were taking place at NSA. Look, former Governor Bill Richardson told me personally that his phone was being tapped by
Really?
NSA.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the extent, and it was not just his phone, but it was the guy he was talking to about arranging for a deal with the North Koreans. They were also tapping Secretary of State Colin Powell's phone.
Wow.
So this is what was going on. These are the abuses. So if you're the Secretary of State, Governor of New Mexico, and you're being wiretapped, what if you're somebody else, just a regular citizen, who may be against the war? So this is all going on at NSA. The same time, Cheney is like wringing their necks, trying to get them to cook the books and come up with probably false intercepts showing that Saddam Hussein was personally had the nuclear firing codes for his nuclear weapon. Sort of like what's being played out against Iran today.
Right now, right? Yeah.
Same playbook from the same neocons, same Israel lobby folks we've seen before.
And directed this, in this case, for example, from Cheney's office, most likely, right?
Oh, exactly. It was Cheney's office all the way. Cheney had his own chain of command back in those days. He had his own people peppered throughout the government, through the intelligence community, through the military, and so you had Bush with his chain of command, and you had Cheney with his own parallel chain of command. And he tried to basically have the power to veto anything from the official chain of command.
And in a way, in many ways, probably Bush's chain of command was sort of like that little steering wheel for a kiddie car seat, where Cheney was driving the car, actually.
Exactly. I mean, and then the textbook for the other chain of command was My Pet Goat.
Right.
So,
right. So maybe that's good context. So, and back to the case. What was the case the government was making in a nutshell?
The government, it was like something out of a John le Carré, a very bad John le Carré movie, not one that's well done. They accused Ken Ford of arranging to drive out to Dulles Airport to make contact, to do one of these cash for documents exchanges with a representative of an unnamed foreign country.
It stayed unnamed, right? They never named it during the trial.
They never named the country. It's sort of like one of those old Mission Impossible shows where the country was fake.
Right? Yeah, Slavolia or something. Yeah, right.
Yeah, or they're going to overthrow the president of San Pablo.
Right.
Some country that does. I mean, this is where the government. This is where the government's case rested on this ludicrous, made for Hollywood, B movie type thing, and covering other espionage cases in the past. We had the country named. It was either the Soviet Union or China or Cuba or
whatever. Right.
a whole host of Israel in some cases.
Right.
And we had no country named here because the case against Ken was absolutely frivolous. And
they didn't bother. They ended up at trial admitting that the exchange, there was no exchange. This was just an intended exchange, right?
Intended exchange, right.
To some unnamed party. So the party that is on the other end of it, or someone who would have witnessed the making of the contract or whatever, would have testified as to the facts of it. They would say, I heard a conversation between, or I witnessed a conversation between Ford and so-and-so, and that party would normally be required to be disclosed and perhaps even examined under oath, subpoenaed and dragged into court. The defense would have the right to do that.
Exactly. But in this case, the defense appeared to be working in cahoots with the prosecutor, and You know, it was just one of the worst kangaroo courts trials I've ever seen. I've seen some bad ones,
You want to
but
you want to grab a glass of water? I'll play a little music, and then we'll come back. Take it.
sounds good.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I'm fighting off the cold here.
Go ahead. We'll be back. And meanwhile, let's think a little bit about Osning here. With
To be
this,
released.
this is a recording from television, and check the song out. It's 8:26 in the morning in New York.
Okay. And that was just a taste of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young playing Down by the River on David Steinberg's show in 1969. The Neil Young song, originally recorded by Neil Young and Crazy Horse, and covered by a lot of other people. And so we have back with us Wayne Madsen. Wayne, let me just kill the music, and that should take care of that. Okay, so we're back. So where were we? Wayne? Well, yeah, I think what I was talking about was the tenure of the trial. The government brought in a host of witnesses. Some of them were well. They also brought in the confidential informant who apparently had so many alias.
We're having a little technical difficulty here. Wayne, are you there? You kind of faded. Hello. We're still connected on Skype. Let's take a look. Oops. We lost him. So we're going to get Wayne back. And let's see here. Hold on. They're going to try to get him back. I'm going to just call him and see if I can get him. We've been talking with Wayne Madsen, who is the journalist who covered the trial of Ken Ford, and we're trying to get him back on the line now. We've lost him on Skype for some reason, and let's see. Wayne, do we have you? No, we're still ringing. Okay, that's what Skype sounds like when you ring. It is 8:29 in the morning. You're listening to CPRmetro.org, Community Progressive Radio for the metropolitan area and the world. I'm Don DeBar, and do we have Wayne yet? No, I think we're still ringing. Yeah, we're still ringing. Okay, well, he maybe lost his connection there, and I'm just going to tell him to call me when he can. And when he calls back, we'll talk to him. We've been talking about the case of Ken Ford, who was a former NSA worker. And there he goes. Hang on, we got him back. Okay. Wayne, are you there?
Never underestimate the power of the NSA.
Oh, man. Yeah, you think they might have busted us up, huh?
Yeah, maybe so.
So go ahead, pick up where you left off.
Well, I was talking about the confidential informant. Now, she used the name for the trial purposes of Tanya Tucker, not to be confused with Glenn Campbell's old
Right.
old girlfriend there. But now, when I said she had a record longer than her arm, I mean credit card fraud, but probably the most bizarre thing she had on her record being arrested in Florida for having sex with a dolphin.
What?
Now, I'm not kidding you. This is the individual that the government paraded out as their star witness against Ken Ford. Now, I don't know how you do that. I don't know whether she, stayed after hours at SeaWorld and, the guard
Did this come up
caught
at the
her.
trial?
This should have come up at the trial. She should have been impeached because of the FBI using a woman like this as a witness against a guy who passed all the personnel reliability tests to be the Secret Service agent to guard the President of the United States
Right.
in the private quarters of the White House.
Right.
Again, one of the most heavily guarded facilities on the planet.
Right.
And the FBI uses as her star witness a woman who was charged with having sex with a dolphin.
Something fishy about that. Anyway.
Well, no pun intended,
Yeah,
right?
or something mammalian.
Well,
actually.
they are mammals.
Right.
They are mammals after all, not fish.
Right. Although some
Except
people eat them as tuna fish because they get caught up.
Japanese seem to have an issue there. Yeah.
Go ahead. Anyway, so she was present when the NSA came and the FBI, and she had actually slept over that night, right?
She had been there. Obviously, had been prompted by the FBI to be there when they showed up the next day, and she was. There were phone calls made before the FBI and NSA showed up. There were phone calls made between this individual and various locations. It looks like she may have actually been placed within a contractor job in the area, that she was having her hotel bill paid for her in Annapolis.
Near the FBI office, right?
Yeah, near the FBI office, and one of the places she apparently was using as a place of employment or a place to hang her hat during the day was an NSA contractor called Bearing Point. Now, Bearing Point they're like these efficiency experts, accountant firm. But they did, over the last decade, they did worm their way into NSA. So it was quite apparent that there was a lot of collusion going on between the FBI, NSA, this one contractor, this dubious confidential informant, and Ken was the target for this. This was a major operation. But remember, what Cheney obviously wanted to do was make an example. So when he put the order out, drop all the murder cases, drop all the missing persons cases, and let's go after Ken Ford,
who had documented his
to make
sin.
him an example,
right? His sin.
For all other,
Again, his sin was just documenting part of the narrative that the Bush-Cheney administration had issued about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq for the NSA, saying, guys, by the way, we find actually there are none. And Cheney and the crew were trying to suppress that. That's what this case was about, basically. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, it's the same thing. And we know that, I know many other intelligence professionals lost their jobs, too, because they didn't cook up the intelligence from various other agencies around the intelligence community, CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, one that you don't hear much about, but they process all the spy satellite imagery. Right. But this is what was going on at the time, and Ken Ford was just another victim of this, Bush-Cheney war administration.
That's one of the weaknesses of this system, too, is that you have an example being made basically in the front of the entire security establishment, the national security establishment, or at least to the extent that it's visible to them, of a guy who honestly believes his job is to provide accurate intelligence information to the White House to protect the national
Right.
security of the country. And the example is that by doing so, unless you are instead serving some political aim, and perhaps even, well, certainly without even regarding the national security interests of the United States, you will be punished.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been drilled into every intelligence professional for decades, at least since the foundation of the national security state and the signing by Truman of the National Security Act of 47,
Right.
that, it's to provide intelligence. Now, unfortunately, many agencies got off on tangents and got involved with other stuff like overthrowing foreign governments, assassinating political leaders. But I mean, but those decisions are not made by usually the people who are the analysts, the people who are looking at trends and whatnot, and listening to intercepts of communications. These people are just doing their job, and obviously Cheney and the neocons tried to change that culture, and I'm afraid it hasn't changed back. That Obama has done nothing. So we're still in that
Except
situation.
prosecute other whistleblowers. I mean, you look at Bradley Manning, for example, as one notable example. Yeah.
Right. Tom Drake was Obama continued the prosecution of him. He was now his an NSA. Tom Drake, his only crime was to show that the NSA had wasted billions of dollars of taxpayers' money.
Right.
That's supposed to be some sort of national security secret. Of course it is.
Right.
But to protect the careers of Michael Hayden and Keith Alexander, the present and past directors of the NSA, that's why it's classified to keep their behinds out of jail.
Yeah, because
the only people
you're hiding theft too, right? I mean,
exactly.
Right. If you're not going to examine what happened, presumably the money didn't evaporate. Somebody got it that shouldn't have, and generally they call that theft when it's like a loaf of bread or something in a store.
Yeah, it's only theft though if you're somebody out of work who's trying to make your kid a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Like Chris,
it's not theft though if you're the director of NSA and you're committing contract fraud that's rewarding your friends, billions of dollars in sole source contracts.
Right. Okay, so Tanya Tucker, a.k.a. Tanya Stewart, a.k.a. who knows who else, Jane Doe, and I was having an image before in my head of a dolphin dressed in an overcoat with sunglasses and a fedora trying to sneak into her hotel.
Yeah, friend of Flipper. Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead. So they sick her on Ford through a dating website, and we come to the point where she stays overnight, not for the first time. He wakes up. She's got suitcases. The FBI shows up, and now that's where we're at.
Yeah, and the FBI apparently had the place cased out, so they were actually physically present in the neighborhood, in their cars before this whole incident went down. So this had been a well choreographed thing when they showed up at his front door for the first time.
Right. So then what?
Well, then he, of course, is eventually they pull a gun on him. They want to search his house. Of course, he figured, look, I haven't done any wrong. If he had been guilty of anything, he would say, hey, look, I want to see my lawyer. You guys have no right to be here. Sort of like what you get when somebody busts a drug guy's house. He knows exactly what his rights are. But no, because Ken's trying to cooperate, he's shocked. And then later, of course, they pull guns on him, and this is I'm petrified that they're going to kill him.
What they when they showed up, apparently,
Yeah.
They had told him they wanted to discuss a national security matter, and he let them in and had a long conversation with them because he thought they wanted some further debriefing or something. And even though he didn't work there anymore, and even though he wasn't required to do it, he wanted to help them out. He looked at them as colleagues.
Exactly. But they obviously, this was a ploy to get inside.
Mm-hmm.
Before long, I think there was probably some 30 FBI and NSA agents, parading through his home. So, I mean, I think this goes this goes to prove one thing is, never help these guys out.
Yeah, right.
Forget what your mommy told you. The policeman is always your friend. No.
Call your
The
lawyer.
policeman, yes, right. The policeman is your enemy, and you have to treat him as such.
Right.
And even when you get a lawyer, watch out there too, because as I said, Ken finally, got an attorney. There was a strange turn of events when he had a public defender also.
Really?
The guy who was in charge of the public defender's office turned out to be a friend of his attorney. There was no attempt to do a recusal there. They also went judge shopping. I mentioned this guy Massetti, the guy who tried to call me to the stand during the trial as a member of the press.
Right.
The first judge assigned was an African-American judge. As you know, Ken is African-American.
Right.
And obviously the government was not real happy with that. So, one of the first things they tried to do was get that case out from under that African-American federal judge and get it reassigned to this guy Massetti.
So they go to trial, and he's charged with this plot to convey secret documents to some unnamed ambassador
Of San Pablo, I guess.
Yeah, right, of some unnamed country, right.
Moon over Parador, yeah.
Right, that's exactly right. And they never even alleged that it happened. In fact, they admitted in court that this never happened. They charged him with and convicted him of intent to do this without naming who it was, or even in general terms who was being the intended beneficiary. So they never had a chance to examine anybody.
Right. It's also important to mention that Ken was the only person ever successfully prosecuted under the 1917 Espionage Act. Really? Now, this was a very arcane act. Remember the time frame, 1917.
Right.
Woodrow Wilson wanted the United States to get in a war that was very unpopular. I mean, Germany was no more imperialistic in that war than the British were.
Right.
But of course, we forgot who we fought against in the Revolution.
Yeah, right.
But Wilson was, of course, putting everybody in jail. Eugene Debs even threatened Theodore Roosevelt, former President Theodore Roosevelt, with jail for not supporting the war. And he had A. Mitchell Palmer's goons running around. What was before the FBI in these Palmer raids. And this was when the Espionage Act, of course, one of those goons, one of Palmer's goons, the head goon was a guy named J. Edgar Hoover.
Right.
So this is the time frame that this act is passed. So they use this act to prosecute for the first time successfully Ken Ford. I think that was also part of this, to see if they could get a successful prosecution of this
1917
law. Now, there was at the same time of the Ken Ford case, there was another prosecution under the Espionage Act of two former American Israel Public Affairs Committee people, AIPAC,
really?
Steve Roseman and Keith Wiseman, for accepting classified material from a guy named Larry Franklin who worked at the Pentagon and handing them over, or being involved with these documents. And these were classified documents. Let me tell you, these included code-worded documents from the CIA, stuff that could really impact our national security. This stuff a lot of it wound up in the hands of the Israeli Mossad chief agent here at their embassy up in Northwest D.C.
Wow.
Because these guys obviously were Jewish, working for AIPAC, that case was eventually dropped. They were charged, but then the case, like I say, the case. So if the case, that's a real country. There were real meetings between these individuals, Weissman and Rosen, and Israeli Mossad guys from the embassy, and also a Washington Post reporter was involved in these meetings, believe it or not.
Let me ask.
Again, we get back to the fact that the Post really isn't in the news reporting.
Right.
I don't know what they are, but they're not a newspaper.
They publish press releases.
This was a real country. Israel, a real intelligence service, Mossad, real documents, classified, a sensitive compartmented information, SCI, code-worded, compartmented, above top secret in some cases, documents. This was real, where the stuff against Ken was made out of whole cloth. but the case against Weissman and Rosen was dropped, and the one against Ken Ford was allowed to continue by a U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney, defense counsel, and judge, all wrapped up with the same people that Rosen and Weissman and Michael Ledeen and that whole cabal was involved with. It's an incredible story.
Why do you say that the fact that they were Jewish resulted in the case being dropped against them? What's the link?
Because Jane Harman, who was on the House Intelligence Committee at the time, they tried to do a deal with her. The Justice Department contacted her and said, look, if you'll go easy on this wiretap business, this illegal NSA wiretap business, we won't raise any stink about the fact that we've got these same wiretaps. Have you, Miss Congresswoman Harman, involved with these same characters from the Israeli embassy?
Really?
Yeah, I mean, the deal was done. It was. Now, Harman's no longer in Congress. She took Lee Hamilton's spot over at the Woodrow Wilson Center. But it was quite clear that nothing was done in this case because, look, the Israel lobby basically, Helen Thomas, God bless her soul. Gee, I almost said rest her soul. She's still around. I saw her 2 weeks ago. She's still looking pretty good. And she's feisty and she's hanging in there. But Helen Thomas was right when she said, this lobby runs this town. Of course, I see it on a daily basis.
Okay, so back to Ken's case. So Go ahead. So we're at the trial. They present. What evidence did they present?
Well, they really didn't present much of any. What they had was this confidential informant, Tanya Tucker, with all the aliases. They had some people that worked at NSA who were just saying, look, these are our policies. He violated the policies. But, one of the things came up, if he took his vehicle up there and loaded these boxes into his vehicle and tried, somehow gained access to the gate, the key, or it's, much more sophisticated. It's an electronic system.
Right.
If he had done all this, well, let's see the video of him doing it. Obviously there's cameras all over.
They didn't have any of that stuff?
The camera happened to have been broken that day, they said.
Really? The camera was broken? At NSA headquarters?
Yeah. Yeah, on that particular loading dock area, that particular day, it was broken, so they couldn't come up with a video. Look, we know what goes on.
Really, geez.
And if you were the judge, you would have said, "I'm sorry, I'm declaring a mistrial here because this is you're believing that we're going to believe you based on some supposition that he did this. There were no other witnesses that saw him actually do any of this."
So now you have this woman that is living in a hotel near the FBI. Question about who's paying for the hotel. Finds him through a dating site. And is sleeping at his house. I don't know beyond that, but I mean, it gives the appearance that she's being paid to sleep with him by the government, and then she's and then she's the witness. Well, I mean, that usually ends up in a rap sheet too, doesn't it? But
So
and now her testimony is the mainstay of the government's case, and yet he's convicted.
Yeah. He's convicted. He, as I said, the jury is tainted because there's a NSA contractor on the jury. And, this is what happens. You get an NSA contractor on a jury. They don't even have to be the jury foreman. And in this case, he wasn't the foreman. But, you had a lot of retired African-American women on that jury, This is the kind of guy who, inside that jury room, because there's no one else in there, the judge isn't in there. There's no officers of the court in there. It's just the jurors.
Right.
He can say, well, gee, it would really be bad if you voted to voted that, let this guy off. What about your, they could come after your Social Security check. Oh, yeah, how about you, Mrs. Jones? How about you're retired from the Social Security Administration? Gee, they could come after your pension check. This is why you keep people like that off of a jury. But in this case, obviously, they let one of these guys on, and it's quite clear that person was on there to basically taint that jury.
Is there any evidence of this happening? Have any of the jurors come forward?
You don't know what goes on in the jury room, and as far as somebody coming out and telling a member of the press,
right.
That happened, that would be part of the shakedown.
Right.
The jury, and please don't say anything about this.
Right. Yeah, and again, if you were afraid to not convict during the trial, you're still just as easily threatened, and a few years older, and maybe a little more tired of being threatened. So maybe more vulnerable.
Well, jury tampering, we know, goes on a lot with mafia cases, and but it also goes on when the government's involved, not just the mafia.
Yeah. Well, so let's see. So he gets convicted and he's sentenced to 6 years.
6 years up in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. So I mean, basically, the appeals process. I mean, he was not allowed to appeal his own case.
What?
There was a hearing in Richmond at the appellate court, and there was no trial. There was no hearing. There was just a determination that there'd be no appeal.
On papers?
I mean, we really have a kangaroo court justice system in this country. Wow. When somebody, has been in a position to guard two presidents of the United States, including Bill Clinton when he used to come out and sneak a cigar from Hillary in the guise of walking by the dog in the rose.
That's a trusted person.
When somebody who's
we're apparently having technical difficulties again with the connection with Wayne. You're listening to an interview with Wayne Madsen here at CPRmetro.org, talking about the case of Ken Ford, former NSA official who was prosecuted and convicted under the 1917 Espionage Act of espionage. And it happened several months after he submitted a report as part of his job at the NSA, informing his superiors that his research had shown, which was assigned to him, that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That report was submitted in May of 2003, 2 months after, looks like we lost Wayne, 2 months after shock and awe. So I'm going to give you a little more music. I'm going to see if I can't get Wayne back for one more blast here. And we'll be back in a minute with, hopefully with Wayne Madsen, and otherwise in a few minutes we'll be with Bernard White, who will take you out to the 12 o'clock hour. And
okay.
Sorry, we just stopped that. Wayne, we have you back, huh? Wayne? Are you there? Do we have you back? Wayne? I hear you moving around, but I don't hear your mic. Let's see. Oh, and
yeah.
Oh, whoopsie-doo. Let's try him one more time. And let's see if we can get him back on the line. I'm sorry. It is 8:54 in the morning. And
hello?
Hey, how are you? I hear you. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, Wayne, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, so we got to wrap it up. Give us like 1 minute summary, and we'll continue this another time.
Okay. Well, I think the lesson learned in the Ken Ford case is that it doesn't matter whether you work in NSA or some other more civilianized part of the government. They do not like people who are don't carry out these political operations. As we know, Ken was convicted because he told the truth about Iraqi WMDs.
Only to his superiors,
these are the
too.
same.
He didn't even go public. He only told his superiors.
Exactly. But I know of so many cases like his. Some you don't know these people because they've never surfaced. It's been basically covered up. But this goes to show that there are people in the administration, the Bush and Cheney administration, as well as this Obama administration, which is now worse on whistleblowers than the previous one.
Right.
But this is part of this extension and continuance of the secret government, and it's not getting any better under Obama. It's actually gotten worse.
Okay, Wayne, thank you very much. We'll be in touch again. I'd like to go into some more detail about the post-trial phase of Ken Ford and some of the things you saw while you were there at the trial. That will be interesting. So thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you again.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye now.
Okay, so it is 8:56 in the morning, and you're listening to CPRmetro.org, Community Progressive Radio from the Metropolitan New York area and the world. Coming up at 9 o'clock, Bernard White. He'll take you out to the 12 o'clock hour, and then at 12 o'clock, this week's edition of Building Bridges with Mimi Rosenberg and Ken Nash. I'm Don DeBar, and let's just go back and finish this tune to go out.